I treat training as an opportunity to have a conversation with my body every day. There's a difference between something being complicated and something being complex.
Welcome to the Strength Connection Podcast, a show to share stories, insights, and experiences in strength, physically, mentally, and spiritually. I'm Michael Kurkowski, host of the Strength Connection, and I'm so grateful that you can join me today. So in these episodes, I connect with some of the most inspiring and successful individuals to chop it up and learn from true life experiences that have helped them become who they are, the strongest versions of themselves. One of the greatest ways I've always learned the most important lessons is through stories. We all have them, and they make us who we are. So let's dive in. Here we go.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Strength Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kurkowski. Thank you for joining me. It's me and you today. This is a solo episode. I hope you had a great week with the holiday, the 4th of July. And it's been a couple weeks since I jumped on here solo. Had some interesting episodes that I wanted to get out and release to you guys earlier. So I wanted to recap a little bit of those, as well as a couple of conversations I had this week. Had a couple things that really sparked my mind. I was contemplating and thinking about a lot. So I wanted to share those with you, which stemmed a bit into one of the biggest lessons I learned over the past couple of years with intuitive training. Not the benefit of it, but one of the things of where I went wrong with it. And I think those are important lessons to think about and to dive into and to also express, because it's very easy to, when you put out content, whether it's through social media or a podcast, it's very easy to just always highlight the good things and just never go over the failures or the things that you do wrong, which anybody who's doing anything in the world of success knows it's many, many failures to every success that comes through. And I wanted to share just one of those lessons that I kind of had to learn the hard way of going in. So I'm going to dive into that, and that's going to be today. So had Peter Nieman's from last week, which was a blast to connect with Peter. I was really curious about connecting with him because of his hybrid strength model that he does of combining the methods of FRC and Strong First, really the mobility and the strength together. Just from seeing his work on Instagram, we've had mutual friends. I've had some people that he's worked really closely with come on the podcast. So I just, reached out to him and asked if he would jump on, and he was, really courteous with his time. And great young coach, really putting together a lot of interesting stuff in Port Orange, Florida, with that combination together. And, it's fascinating. Some of the people that I've met in the world of strength, some of the strongest pound for pound people have really found this combination of FRC mobility work and Strong First principles. So I was like, there's really definitely something to combining these methods together. And Peter's a practitioner and a theorist behind that. So he was a great guest to have on and really dive into his methods. And biggest takeaway I got from speaking with Peter was when I was asking him about his own training that he does. And he trains very intuitively of kind of what feels best for him for the day. He dropped a really awesome quote where he said, "I treat training as an opportunity to have a conversation with my body every day." And that was one of those like sit back in your chair, mic drop moments when I was like, I love that quote. That is so awesome. Wrote it down immediately. And it reminded me a lot when I spoke with, Frankie and Adam with the biofeedback solution about going into your training with a question rather than an answer, and how easy it is that we always go in and just whatever it says on the paper that we're supposed to do for the day, regardless of how you feel, that's what you need to get done. And there's a different approach to it where you actually go in and ask your body, well, what do I need today? What's the best thing that I can do? And it's more challenging because if you're going to go into that approach, is you need to be very self-aware of your body. You need to really trust and understand your intuition. And I've talked ad nauseum about my experience with intuitive training, starting Breakthrough Secrets, and what it's done for me. And it was just a really interesting way that Peter expressed that. So that one's available now. Go back and check that out. And then I had Nick Motycka on afterwards. And this was a much different conversation than I've usually had on the podcast about Nick. He's a former law enforcement officer for a couple decades in Calgary. And he connected with a friend of mine a while ago in some mastermind group connection that they got together on. And my buddy reached out to be like, hey, you need to reach out to this guy. He's got a really interesting story about plant medicine therapy and his experience with psilocybin, which is some of the stuff that I've talked about quite a bit, and really about how it cured his PTSD. And we jumped on the phone, we chatted for a few minutes. He told me a little bit about his story and really his journey. And I was like, this is a really fascinating story. And he came on the podcast and really told me from beginning to end everything that happened with his life and what PTSD was doing to him. And I was curious about this because PTSD is something I think we know what that term means, but unless you either live it or you've lived very closely with a spouse or somebody in your home that deals with it, you might not be really aware of what it actually does on a day-by-day basis. Like, how does somebody live with PTSD? What are the different things that happen? What are the triggers that happen in that time? And I personally was really curious about that. Like, I know the term, I've had friends who have had that before, but to actually like go through what is life like having to deal with this, and from his time being in law enforcement with many different incidences that he went through with times triggered a lot of things that he dealt with as a child. And then when he went into this plant medicine work, all of a sudden, very quickly, he was able to confront them and resolve them. And he went into great detail behind that. So very much on the mental side and the spiritual side of strength, this was an episode that I was really curious about. And I was really grateful for Nick for being open with his just his life. Really spoke about very vulnerable, very intimate details about what these things did to him. And that's why I thought it was really important. And I thought it was a really curious conversation to have. And I was really grateful that he jumped on. So if that speaks to you at all, then that's definitely an episode that you want to go and check out. Nick is very articulate in his message, and it was really enjoyable to have him on. And then the last one I'll recap really quick was the one I released earlier this week with Joel Jamieson, who Joel, if you're in the strength and conditioning world, needs little to no introduction. He is a pioneer of a lot of the work we understand and know about conditioning training. I've been wanting to have Joel on the show for a while. I've been curious about his methods and really just the process of how he goes into learning these things. And he's been doing it for 15 years. And this was just a absolute episode filled with golden nuggets. Joel is so smart. He talks really fast. It's hard sometimes to keep up with everything that he's doing because he's so smart with it. But when he talked about like dynamic energy control and what really conditioning training really is and what the major benefits that we need to understand about it is just absolutely fascinating. There's no other person, I think, that can really have such an in-depth conversation about conditioning. And I was just really grateful that he just took the time and to jump on and talk about everything that he's been working on with Morpheus, with Metamorphosis, with 8 Weeks Out, all of his programs out there. So if you're interested in conditioning, what that actually means and the best modes and modalities to work on that, go check out Joel. If you know Joel already, you know how amazing it is. Anytime you get a chance to speak with him directly or hear his wisdom, it's definitely a treat of the day. So yeah, go check that out. So there's two different things I want to dive into of the conversation I had this week. One was I talked with Rafe Kelley this week, which episode is going to be out in a couple weeks. Now, if you don't know Rafe, he is one of the pioneers in the world on parkour training. Which I'm always fascinated by. If you ever see the videos of guys who are really like parkour masters, it's like an awe-inspiring thing. It's different. I told him, like, it's different than seeing like a professional athlete in the NFL or the NBA. Like, you're like, oh my God, like that's amazing. But to see these people go from one tough stunt to another one and have the balance and be able to go from one thing to another and kind of keep flowing through, you almost just hold your breath. It's kind of like seeing a guy like Alex Honnold, like free soloing a crazy mountain. It's like all of a sudden you don't even realize that you're holding your breath watching these people do what they do. And I was curious to just hear about all those methods that he did, from parkour visions into evolve, move, play, and really that aspect of what play is and why it's so important. to us. And if you haven't, I listened entirely to his conversation now with Jordan Peterson on his podcast, all about like the importance of play specifically with children. So that was a beautiful conversation. If you haven't checked that out, to go listen to. But what we talked about a lot was really his journey in parkour and the difference of that and his experience with gymnastics. Because in gymnastics he said there's a lot of similarities to it of parkour, like a lot of the different stunts. It's a lot of like comes from tumbling. He's an incredible historian of human movement, and we dove into that too. But what I asked him was like, well, what was it about parkour that made you feel different, like that you wanted to, uproot all your other stuff and really go into this 100% full on and, full course? And gave a really interesting distinction. So he said, there's a difference between something being complicated and something being complex. And it's still a bit fresh in my mind, but I might get a couple things wrong. So if you go back and listen to the episode, please do so. But he said complicated is like just what it says. Like there might be a lot of different things included in it, but it's all arriving at the same situation. You're trying to achieve one specific goal. I kind of use the analogy of like a rocket into space, where it's complicated. Like there's a lot of math, there's a lot of things you need to do, but it all ends up in getting to one goal. Like we need to get this rocket off the ground and get through the Earth's atmosphere and go into space. And he said gymnastics is very much like that. It's a structured thing where it's like, as long as you follow the steps, yeah, it's going to be complicated. You need to practice it and need to figure it out over and over again, but eventually you're arriving at one specific solution. Where parkour is more complex, where it's the same thing. There's a lot of different things going on, but you can arrive at many different solutions. It might be more individualized. And he used the analogy of like playing chess, where I didn't know this, but like the amount of different ways that someone can win at a chess game, depending on how the moves go, is like 30 to the 64th power, something like that. Virtually, it's like about the same amount of ways to win chess as there are electrons in the universe. Like it's absolutely insane. When he talked about the amount of different ways that can go about. So that's complex because you can get to a lot of different answers. And he said that's what parkour is. It's like, because you don't know which way you're absolutely going to go. It's a lot more flow. There's some creative approach to it. So I related that immediately with structure versus intuition in training, where it's like gymnastics, it's very structured. It's like follow the path, follow the plan, and you're going to arrive at XYZ result. Where parkour is much more of trusting your own intuition. You have a gymnastics knowledge and background of all of the movements, but it's a lot more of the creative energy that's getting in there. So I thought that was a really cool distinction that he talked about. And in then speaking today, as I'm recording this today, I just got off with my good friend Pat Flynn, who has been on the podcast numerous times and one of my favorite people to talk to on the podcast. He runs an amazing podcast as well, the Pat Flynn Show, and he's been a writer and an author and a speaker in the fitness world as well as the philosophy world for a long time. And we were talking about that difference of structure and intuition. We've had this conversation many times, and I told him about when I failed at intuitive training with one of the biggest things that I wish I could have gone back and changed, but those failures, they come, with life. And that was a couple of years ago when I said I opened up my new business, Breakthrough Secrets. I was starting a new podcast, all this different stuff. And I needed all my mental faculties to do all the things that I needed to from a business point of view. So training wise, didn't necessarily need to take a back seat. I wouldn't say that, but I couldn't follow a very structured, very aggressive based training program at that time. And that's when I really dove headfirst into intuitive training. I was doing it a little bit before, but this was when I trained every day for 6 months, and every day was a little bit different. And I was just trusting my intuition, trusting my awareness of it. And the benefits that I felt was unbelievable. I was still getting stronger. I was still getting leaner, like all the things that I would want from a physical perspective in training, I was still getting. And I was also leaving all the time to still have my mental energy to build a business, to put everything up there. So at that moment, I was like, Oh, I found the secret sauce. Like it was a eureka moment. I found it. This is what I need to bring out to the world and to talk about more with everybody that comes to me. And I started diving into intuitive training with a lot of clients, a lot of brand new people that I was getting on. I was selling it hard, like, yeah, this is the way to go. And it sounds very exciting. It sounds very fun to go in, have that flexibility, have that trust your own intuition, have a plan without a plan, type mindset. Yeah, it's a very easy thing to sell into someone's mind. But then I ran into a problem where a lot of people that I was going into and having this intuitive approach to, they were getting overwhelmed. They didn't understand where it was going and they weren't following the plan. They didn't have the knowledge base and the structure behind it. And it might sound very self-evident, but it was another like moment in my head. I was like, okay, why did this work so well for me? This isn't working for other people. And I realized, well, I had a dozen years of a lot of structure, a lot of wisdom, a lot of reps underneath, underneath the bar, underneath the kettlebell in order to, gain this knowledge in order to get into intuition. And I was just kind of in my own mind of like headstrong being like, no, you could teach this to somebody right off the bat. And I realized, no, like it's not, is structure good or is intuition good? It's like they're both two sides of the coin. You need them both together. And that's when I started adjusting things and kind of building the four pillars that I work with now, and realizing that yes, you need structure. You need to have that foundation, those pillars down. And then all of a sudden, eventually you will get to a point where intuition is just that natural next step. So kind of talking with Rafe, who said this, like he went into parkour, probably wouldn't have had that same experience and that feeling of flow and freedom if he didn't have that gymnastics background where he learned a lot of the structure. Talked the same thing with Pat about that as well. And trying to put like a time frame on it, and this is a subjective time frame, but I think if you are at the beginning of a journey of something where you're not, it's something that is still very new to you, you need a good 6 months to a year. I would say probably more closer to a year of following a very structured, diligent plan. Then you build into that next phase of getting into that creative phase, that creation phase where you can be more flexible, trust your intuition and go full force into a program there. But why I think the year time frame is an important metric is because if you can do it for a year, that means that you've been able to stay consistent through all different seasons of life. It means you've done it when things are going really well. You've done it when things are going really shitty. There's done it when you've been sick or you've fallen off and then you've got back on, where people have been trying to steal your time and you still got it in. So all different things that pop up in life, you've still been able to get it done, which means you broke through that point where consistency is now not the obstacle. You've built the discipline up. Now you can get into a more freedom-based, feeling of going into intuition. And then that's another phase to go into. So this is something I've learned, and I kind of had to learn the hard way. And I said I apologize to some people that I think I jumped the intuition gun too fast on them, and wish I went back on it. But you can only move forward, and you can only learn from these mistakes, right? So, and I think this applies to anything. It could be to strength training, it could be to starting a new business, it can be to starting a new relationship. Like you need to get those foundational things down. And follow that structure for a bit, then you go into more of that, intuitive approach, which I think is eventually, going into that next phase. So felt really compelled to share that with you. And I hope that was valuable for you. I learned so much from these conversations that I have from people. Sometimes it's brand new stuff, or oftentimes it's just makes me question things that I held as gospel, I hold as deep truths. And it makes me question them a little bit more, which either makes me change my mind or it makes me double down on it and be like, no, yeah, I've thought this through and this is absolutely the way to go. And I think that's an important thing to do in anything, even if it's something that you believe is so deeply true, still question it. Still question, why do I believe this is so true? Because you're either going to find a better solution, maybe something different, or you're going to double down on it. And you did the due diligence of thinking it through. So actually it, is actually a stronger belief for you. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. Much love to you. Go back and check out Peter, Nick, and Joel. I'll be on the lookout for new ones that are coming out. It's been a really blast of a beginning of summer here of connecting with some great guests, and I'll be having many more for you. Much love to you guys. Talk to you on the next one. Peace.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found some great value here. And if you like this episode, please drop a comment and leave us a 5-star rating and review. It does more to build the show than you can imagine. And do not forget to check out and join the Strength Connection Facebook group. In this group, I share the biggest takeaways and lessons from these amazing conversations, as well as training and strength tips for pursuing mastery and fulfillment in life. This group is filled with individuals looking to take full control over their strength, and it's the perfect space to explore new ideas and to share your journey. And you'll also get exclusive access to these Strength Connection Mastery seminars. It's a deep dive into the physical, mental, and spiritual training that you can begin using immediately. So do not wait, go now. Seriously, go. All right, much love to you. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you on the next one.